Dumb and stupid watercolor hacks that I wish I had known when first starting watercolor or a lot earlier than when I actually learned them. Another thing that you really need to do is swatch all of your colors. So this is actually a small little chart thing, and I have laminated all of them. I made this small enough for me to be able to put into my watercolor journal so that if I'm going anywhere, it's basically inside of my watercolor journal. So I have it with me at all times, or I will just stick it right on my roller cart that I have right here next to me when I'm painting here. But one thing that you need to realize is what you see wet in your watercolor palette is not necessarily the color that it will look like when it dries. So a lot of times when I was first beginning in watercolor, I would choose a color based on how it looked wet inside of my watercolor palette. And then after the paint had dried on my paper, I was like, why does this look different than what it looked like in my watercolor palette? Some colors all your colors will change a little bit when they dry. I'm not saying like it's this huge big mystery that like every single color that you paint with is going to dry differently. All colors will slightly shift, but there are some colors that I was thinking, mauve is one in particular that I'm thinking from the Cotman series. That particular color, when it's wet, it looks like a nice, fresh, juicy kind of grape color when it's wet. But then when it dries, it slightly shifts and changes, and it's not that rich grape color anymore. Here, I'll show you on the color wheel. This one, this is another thing that I do. I line up all my colors and put them in a color wheel and kind of see where they lay. So this one right here, I'll go ahead and put it up close. That one that's on my finger right now, that is Mauve Cotman series. That's how it dries. But when it's wet, it actually looks more like this color. So if you're going for more of this particular color, mauve is not the one that you really want to go for. It looks more of a kind of pastel-y. It's a beautiful color. I love the Mauve Cotman series from Winsor & Newton color, but if I'm going for more of a distinct purple color, I need to choose another color or mix my mauve with another color to kind of produce that color. So if you see watercolor artists who have been doing this for years, swatching their colors and really testing out things, there is a reason for that, because colors when they are wet look different when they are dry. And some colors, they look close, but then others almost change an entire hue. And so it's just something that you need to keep in mind when you are painting with watercolor. Hi there, Future Carrie here once again. I really hope you're enjoying this particular series where I'm kind of breaking down tips specifically with watercolor paints. Next week, there'll be another tip with watercolor paints, but as I was editing this video, I thought about another tip related to swatching colors and this kind of concept. And this particular painting, I feel like, illustrates it really well. But as you are painting with watercolor or even ink, keep in mind that when you're putting down the color wet, it's usually, not always, and this is another reason why we swatch our colors to learn them better, but usually that color is going to be a lot darker while it is wet than when it dries. So as you notice, when I'm painting this cat, when I'm laying down the shadows for this particular cat, the shadows are extremely dark, and I actually thought, oh no, I messed this up. It's way too dark. I might have to tweak this. But as they started to dry, they dried a lot lighter to the point that you could almost not see them. So keep that in mind also while you're painting. A lot of times beginners will lay down color that's almost too light And it's just because they're not fully aware of what the color is going to look like once it's dry. And you need to pump up that color a little bit when you're laying it down, especially if you're working with cheaper watercolor paper. You don't want to over paint or overuse or warp that paper with too many layers or glazing layers, or too many wet on wet techniques and basically rough up that paper and ruin it. You really want to figure out how to gauge the exact amount of color that you need to put on, and you learn that through swatching colors. So yeah, I hope this particular tip helps you in your watercolor journey, and I will see you next week. Happy painting, y'all!